I never expected my marriage to Sophia to be perfect. I wasn't naive. I knew from the beginning that her love for me wasn't the same as my love for her. But I had convinced myself that it didn't matter. To me, she was my wife, my partner, the woman I thought I'd build a life with. To her, I was a stepping stone, a way to maintain her luxurious lifestyle after her father decided he was done funding her excesses. Our house, a 3-story mansion in the wealthiest district, was proof of that. A pristine, modern estate with floor-to-ceiling windows, imported marble floors, and an infinity pool she loved to pose in front of for Instagram. Every detail of our life was curated for appearances. I paid for everything. The cars, the designer clothes, the exclusive spa retreats, the vacations she flexed online to make her followers jealous. It wasn't that I minded providing for my wife. I had more than enough wealth to make it happen. But what I minded was her indifference toward me. To the world, we were the perfect couple. She posted carefully staged photos, painting a picture of an enviable marriage. Candlelit dinners, surprise gifts, affectionate captions beneath our images. But behind closed doors, we were nothing more than 2 strangers coexisting under the same roof. I told myself I could live with it. I told myself that love, real love, didn't have to be the foundation of our marriage. I had married a beautiful, refined woman who fit perfectly into my world. Maybe, in time, that would be enough. I was wrong. Because 1 week before Eleanor's birthday party, she made it clear that I was nothing more than a wallet in her world. It started with something small. I had walked into the living room, still in my suit after a long day at work. Sophia was lounging on the sectional, scrolling through her phone, her long legs stretched out in silk pajamas that probably cost more than what some people made in a month. A glass of wine sat on the table beside her, half finished. She didn't bother looking up. "Did you transfer the money for the party yet?" she asked, her voice casual, as if she were asking about the weather. I glanced at her. "No, not yet." That finally made her look up, her perfectly arched brows pulling together in mild irritation. "Why not?" I sighed, loosening my tie. "Because I wanted to go over the budget first. You haven't even told me how much this thing is going to cost." She rolled her eyes, setting her phone down. "Does it matter?" I let out a humorless laugh. "Does it matter?" I repeated, shaking my head. "Sophia, last time you planned an event, the bill was over 30 grand. And that was for a small gathering." She scoffed. "Oh, come on. Don't be dramatic. That was different. Eleanor's birthday is important. We can't just throw some cheap backyard barbecue." I said, arching a brow. "You mean me? Because I'm the one footing the bill, aren't I?" She waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, don't start this again, Alex." I clenched my jaw. Alex. That was me. Her husband. The man she had married not out of love, but out of necessity. I had known the truth before we said our vows. I had known that her father cutting her off had pushed her into my arms, not some grand romantic revelation. But for some stupid reason, I had hoped that with time, she would see me as more than a financial safety net. Tonight, I realized how foolish that hope had been. She sighed, giving me a pointed look. "Listen, the guest list is exclusive. These are the kind of people who can open doors for us. You wouldn't understand, but trust me, it matters." I let out a slow breath, dragging a hand down my face. "You know what? Fine. Just send me the details, and I'll handle it." Her expression smoothed into satisfaction as she picked up her wine glass again. "Good. I already told the planner to go ahead with the premium package. Just transfer the money by tomorrow." "Of course you did," I muttered. I turned to leave, my patience hanging by a thread, but her next words stopped me cold. "Oh, and Alex?" I turned my head slightly, waiting. "Make sure you dress appropriately for the party. The photographers will be there, and we wouldn't want you looking out of place." Out of place? In my own marriage? Something inside me shifted at that moment. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even disappointment. It was something much colder. Something final. I walked away without another word, my mind already racing. For the past 3 years, I had been playing the part of the dutiful husband, funding her lifestyle, giving her everything she wanted, pretending I didn't see the way she barely tolerated my presence. But this was the moment I finally accepted the truth. Sophia didn't see me as her partner. She saw me as her bank account. She had no idea that I was done playing along, that this party she was so obsessed with would be the beginning of her downfall. "Are you even listening, Lucas?" Sophia snapped, waving a guest list in front of me. I barely glanced up from my laptop, keeping my expression neutral. I heard you. She let out an exaggerated sigh, pacing in front of the fireplace like a queen issuing commands. Then answer me. This party is going to be huge. We need the right people there, important people. Every detail has to be perfect, and I need to make sure you're actually taking this seriously. I set my laptop aside and leaned back on the couch, watching her. It was almost amusing, her dramatics, the way she carried herself as if everything revolved around her. It had always been like this. She was standing there in her silk robe, effortlessly elegant, her hair cascading down her back in perfect waves. If a stranger walked in, they would assume she was a woman deeply in love with her husband, planning an event for their shared happiness. But I knew better. I had been watching her closely these past few weeks, and if there was one thing I had finally accepted, it was that nothing about this marriage was real. I exhaled slowly. It's Eleanor's birthday, Sophia, not a networking event. She rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. Same thing. I narrowed my eyes, my fingers tapping against my thigh. She wasn't even pretending anymore. There was no warmth, no affection, just an obsession with maintaining an image. For 3 years, I had let her take the lead on these things. I had handed over my card without question, nodding along as she hosted extravagant dinners, planned elaborate vacations, and surrounded herself with people who barely tolerated her outside of what she could provide. I had excused it as part of the deal. But this time, something felt different. She continued, listing off the so-called right people that had to be there. The socialites, the investors, the elite who would judge her if anything was less than perfection. Then she paused, looking at me expectantly. "Did you book the venue?" she asked. I nodded once. "Yes." "And the catering?" "Handled." She sighed dramatically, collapsing onto the couch beside me. "At least you're good for something," she muttered under her breath. A sharp sting of irritation crawled up my spine, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had paid for everything, planned everything, and still, in her eyes, I was nothing more than a convenient source of income. She picked up her phone and started scrolling, no doubt drafting the next perfectly curated Instagram post. To her, all of this, the mansion, the events, even me, was just a prop in her picture-perfect life. I watched her for a long moment. The way she effortlessly dismissed me, the way she didn't even care about how her words landed. And then I realized, this party wasn't for Eleanor. It was for Sophia. A chance to remind everyone that she was still the queen of high society, even if she was no longer Daddy's little princess. A chance to show off. She had no idea that this night would be the beginning of her downfall. That evening, I sat in my home office, scrolling through the final guest list on my laptop. A list of power players, socialites, and high-profile names. Some were expected. Her mother, Eleanor, the woman the entire party was supposedly for. The one person in Sophia's family who had ever treated me like I belonged. Then there were her so-called friends. Tessa, Naomi, Rachel, the same women who were just as fake as she was. Women who thrived on gossip and turned on each other the moment it was convenient. And then I saw a name that made my stomach twist. Derek, her ex-fiancé, the one who had left her when he realized what kind of woman she really was. My fingers tightened around the mouse. I had never spoken about it, but I knew. I knew that Derek had been her first choice. That if he hadn't walked away, I wouldn't even be sitting here, reading this list. My mind was already racing when I heard the soft click of heels on the floor behind me. Sophia. She leaned against the doorway, sipping a glass of red wine, looking effortlessly unbothered. "Hmm?" she mused, tilting her head. I didn't look at her. "Derek?" I asked, my voice flat. She took another slow sip before smiling. "Oh, relax, Lucas. We're adults. Besides, I thought it would be entertaining." Entertaining. I clenched my fists under the table. It wasn't about Derek. It was about control. She wanted me to know that no matter what I did, she could do whatever she wanted. I forced a smile, turning my head just enough to meet her gaze. "Sure, let's make it a night to remember." She gave a pleased little smirk, thinking she had won something. She had no idea how much she'd regret it. Over the next few days, the party planning continued in full force. I played my part. I nodded when needed. I agreed to the overpriced floral arrangements, the Michelin star catering, the live string quartet. But inside, I was waiting for the moment everything shifted. Because if Sophia thought she could humiliate me, If she thought she could use me and toss me aside like an old accessory, she was in for a rude awakening. This wasn't just about a party anymore. This was about making her understand exactly what she had taken for granted. She wanted a grand spectacle? Fine. I'd give her one. One that she'd never forget. And by the end of the night, the only person paying for it would be her. That night, I sat alone in my home office, staring at the final guest list on my laptop. I could feel the weight of it. The weight of every single name. Each one carefully chosen, each invitation sent with meticulous precision. And yet, one name stood out among the rest. Derek, her ex-fiancé. I ran a finger over my jaw, exhaling slowly. I wasn't stupid. I knew exactly what this was. Sophia had no reason to invite him. They hadn't spoken in years, not since he had left her when he realized what kind of woman she really was. He had been her first choice, the man she had been groomed to marry, the one her father had wanted for her. And yet, somehow, I had been the one standing at the altar that day, slipping a diamond ring onto her finger. Not because she had chosen me, but because I had been the most convenient option after Derek walked away. And now, she was bringing him into my home, to my event, sitting comfortably in the knowledge that no matter what, I wouldn't do anything about it. I clenched my jaw. She had no idea. I closed the laptop and pushed back from my desk. From downstairs, I could hear the distant hum of Sophia on the phone, laughing lightly, probably finalizing details with the planner. The sound grated on my nerves. I stood, walking to the window, looking out over the city skyline. 3 years. 3 years I had played this role, pretending I didn't see the truth, pretending I was blind to who she really was. And for what? For a marriage that was nothing but a business transaction? For a woman who paraded herself as my wife in public, only to dismiss me in private? I let out a slow breath. No, that ended now. This party? It wasn't going to be the spectacle she envisioned. It was going to be the stage for her downfall. And she didn't even see it coming. The next morning, Sophia waltzed into the kitchen with her phone in one hand, barely glancing at me as she sat at the marble island. "Are you free later?" she asked, sipping her coffee. I set my mug down, watching her carefully. "Why?" She waved a hand. "I have a fitting for my dress. I want to make sure it complements your suit." I arched a brow. "Since when do you care about that?" She shot me a look over the rim of her cup. "Since always, Lucas. You're my husband. We have to look good together. People will notice if we don't." There it was. She didn't care about us, only the image of us. She needed me to be the perfect accessory, just as polished and pristine as the life she had carefully curated for herself. I tilted my head, considering her. She had no idea that the very foundation of her world was about to crumble. I took another sip of my coffee. "Sure, I'll come." She smiled, clearly pleased. "Good. And you transferred the money for the party, right?" I set my cup down. "Not yet." Her smile faltered slightly. "Lucas," she sighed. "I told you it needed to be done yesterday." I leaned back, stretching my arms lazily. "And I told you I wanted to go over the details first." She narrowed her eyes, irritation flickering across her face. "I already told you. Everything is handled. You don't need to micromanage me." I smiled slightly. "I know. I just like knowing where my money is going." She huffed, rolling her eyes. "Don't be ridiculous. Just send the payment today, okay?" I nodded, sipping my coffee again. "Sure. I'll take care of it." Just not the way she expected. That night, I sat in the study, my fingers tapping against my knee as I scrolled through my own list. Unlike hers, mine was much shorter. A private investigator, a discreet legal team, a financial analyst. 3 names. 3 people who had been quietly working behind the scenes for the past month. Because while Sophia had been planning a party, I had been planning my exit. I had done the research. I had seen the hidden transactions, the quiet withdrawals, the large sums of money missing from our accounts. She thought I wouldn't notice. She thought I wouldn't care. She thought she could spend my money however she pleased, without consequence. She was wrong. So wrong. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the glowing screen. In less than a week, she would regret underestimating me. The next day, the final preparations for the party were in full swing. I watched from the corner of the living room as decorators swarmed the house, setting up elaborate floral arrangements and absurdly expensive chandeliers. Sophia was in her element. Flitting from person to person, barking orders, making sure everything was exactly as she envisioned. "Lucas," she called, barely looking at me as she motioned toward a folder. I need you to confirm the wine order with the sommelier. The vintage selection has to be perfect. I walked over, picking up the folder. Expensive taste. She smirked. Obviously, we don't serve anything but the best. I flipped through the pages, eyeing the astronomical price tags on the imported wines she had selected. I made a small, approving noise before shutting the folder. Sure, I'll handle it. She grinned, pressing a quick kiss to my cheek. Purely for appearance, since there were people watching. That's why I married you, she said lightly. I let out a quiet chuckle. If only she knew. By the time this party was over, she wouldn't be married to me anymore, and she wouldn't have a single penny of my money left to her name. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft sound of Sophia breathing beside me. Oblivious, unconcerned, still thinking that she was untouchable. But in just a few days, everything would change. The final puzzle pieces were in place. The guest list was locked in. The stage was set, and all that was left was to let the show begin. The night of the party had arrived. From the moment I stepped outside, I knew exactly what kind of night this was going to be. The venue, an exclusive ballroom in the heart of the city, was decorated with absurd extravagance. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceilings, casting golden light over velvet-draped tables set with imported china and gold-plated utensils. The walls were lined with massive floral arrangements, the kind you'd expect at a royal wedding, not a birthday party. Every detail screamed money and status. And yet, none of it was for Eleanor. This wasn't about celebrating her mother's birthday. It was about Sophia's image, her need to be the center of attention, to remind the world that despite her father cutting her off, despite losing her family's backing, she was still powerful, still untouchable, still the queen of high society. I exhaled slowly, adjusting my cufflinks as I stepped onto the red carpet leading to the entrance. Photographers were stationed outside, snapping pictures of the guests as they arrived in their luxury cars, dressed in designer labels, dripping in diamonds. And then, there she was, Sophia, standing at the entrance, a champagne flute in one hand, her other delicately placed on her hip as she posed for the cameras. She looked stunning, of course. She always did. Her gown was custom, an intricate beaded design that shimmered under the lights, hugging her body perfectly, emphasizing the effortless elegance she wanted the world to see. She caught sight of me and smiled. Not a genuine smile. A practiced, public-facing smile, the kind meant to sell the illusion. She walked toward me, slipping her arm through mine, leaning in slightly. "You're late," she murmured under her breath. I glanced at her, my expression unreadable. "Am I?" Her fingers tightened around my arm for just a second before she let out a soft laugh, one designed for the onlookers. "You know how these events work, darling. Timing is everything." I let my lips curve into a slow smirk. Oh, she had no idea how right she was. Inside, the ballroom was already buzzing with energy. Waiters in crisp black suits moved smoothly through the crowd, balancing trays of champagne and imported hors d'oeuvres. Everywhere I looked, people were engaged in polite, meaningless conversation, business deals disguised as casual chatter, backhanded compliments exchanged with polite smiles, alliances being strengthened with a clink of expensive wine glasses. This was Sophia's world, a world of wealth and appearances, power and deception, and she thrived in it. She moved through the room like she belonged on a stage, greeting guests with effortless charm, laughing at the right moments, making sure she was always at the center of attention. She was in her element. She thought she had won, that she was still in control, that I was still playing my role as the devoted, oblivious husband. But she didn't know what I knew. She didn't know what was coming. Not yet. An hour into the party, I had settled into observing. Sophia was busy entertaining her guests, basking in the glow of their admiration. I stayed in the background, nursing a glass of bourbon, watching the pieces fall into place. That's when I saw him. Derek. He had just arrived, stepping into the ballroom like he belonged there, dressed in a tailored black suit, exuding effortless confidence. Sophia noticed immediately. I saw the way her eyes flickered toward him, the brief hesitation before she quickly masked it with a smile. A practiced, careful smile. But I knew her tells. I had spent 3 years studying them, learning them. She had invited him for a reason. Not to be adults about it, as she had claimed. Not for entertainment. She had invited him because she wanted to prove something. To herself. To me. To him. I took a slow sip of my drink, keeping my expression neutral as I watched them exchange polite greetings. Derek played his part well. He was cordial, charming, the perfect guest. But I wasn't stupid. I saw the way she tilted her head just slightly when she spoke to him. The way her fingers lingered on the edge of her glass. The way she smiled a little too long. She was testing me, trying to see if I would react, trying to see if she could still get under my skin. I almost laughed. She had no idea. As the night went on, the atmosphere grew more electric. The guests were fully settled in, conversations becoming looser as the expensive wine continued to flow. Then, at exactly 9 p.m., Sophia took the stage. She stood under the golden chandeliers, her champagne flute in hand, radiating confidence as she addressed the room. "Everyone," she began, her voice carrying effortlessly over the crowd. "I just want to take a moment to thank you all for being here tonight." She turned toward her mother, Eleanor, giving a dazzling smile. "This night is about celebrating an incredible woman," she continued. "A woman who has shaped me into who I am today. So let's raise a glass to the one and only, my beautiful mother, Eleanor." The guests applauded, lifting their glasses in a toast. And then, just as the moment was perfect, just as Sophia was basking in her own orchestrated glory, a waiter stepped onto the stage. A waiter holding the bill. A $22,489 bill. Sophia's smile barely faltered as she glanced at him, clearly expecting him to quietly disappear. Instead, he leaned in, his voice polite but firm. "Ma'am, just confirming the payment method. Will this be on one card or split?" The entire room fell into silence. Sophia blinked. "Excuse me." The waiter remained professional, unshaken by the weight of the moment. "We need confirmation before we proceed with the final charges." A flicker of something crossed her face. Confusion, then irritation, then uncertainty. She turned toward me. "Lucas," she said lightly, her voice carefully controlled. "Take care of this, won't you?" I took a slow sip of my bourbon, letting the silence stretch. I saw the way the guests were starting to whisper, glancing between us. I saw the way her mother frowned, the way Derek tilted his head, intrigued. Finally, I set my glass down, and I smiled. "Oh, sweetheart," I said, my voice carrying just enough to be heard. "I thought you were paying for it." Her expression froze. The air shifted. The tension in the room thickened. And for the first time that night, I saw it. The flicker of panic in her eyes. She had no idea what was happening. She had no idea that this was only the beginning. The silence stretched long and heavy. Sophia stood frozen, her fingers tightening around the delicate stem of her champagne flute. Her expression was unreadable to most, but I knew her too well. That flicker of panic in her eyes? It was real. The waiter remained still, his presence an unmovable force in the sea of now murmuring guests. He wasn't flustered. He wasn't backing down. Because this was protocol, when an event of this scale reached its final tab, the venue needed to confirm the method of payment before proceeding. And Sophia? She had assumed, as always, that I would simply handle it without question. Her lips parted slightly before she quickly regained her composure, turning to me with a carefully rehearsed expression, one of playful exasperation, the kind meant to smooth over any awkward situation. "Lucas," she said lightly, laughter forced into her voice. "Can we not do this right now?" I leaned back in my chair, fingers tapping idly against my bourbon glass. I let the moment breathe, let the room absorb the tension before I spoke. "Sophia," I said, my voice smooth, just loud enough to be heard. "I assumed you'd be covering this. After all, you planned every detail of this party." A few people chuckled under their breath. I saw her mother's frown deepen. I saw Derek's eyebrows lift slightly, curiosity sparking in his gaze. And Sophia? She was furious. She was good at masking it. Her entire existence revolved around controlling perception, but I knew her tells. The subtle twitch in her jaw. The way her fingers clenched slightly before relaxing. She was calculating, trying to fix this before it spiraled. "Of course," she said smoothly, turning back to the waiter. "Charge it to our usual account." The waiter gave her an apologetic smile. "I'm afraid that card was declined, ma'am." The whispers grew louder. My smirk deepened. For the first time that night, Sophia looked at me with actual fear. Not the kind of fear you get when you're embarrassed in front of friends. Not the kind of fear that comes from a minor inconvenience. This was the kind of fear that seeps into your bones, The kind that comes when you realize the ground beneath you is crumbling and there's nothing to hold on to. She didn't know what was happening. She didn't know why her card wasn't working. But I did, because I had made sure of it. 3 days ago, while Sophia had been busy orchestrating this circus, I had been making my own preparations. I had hired the best financial team money could buy, discreet, precise, and ruthless. They had gone through every single account tied to my name, every joint credit line, every hidden expense she thought I wouldn't notice. And then, I cut her off. I had moved everything into accounts she couldn't touch. I had canceled every card linked to her spending habits, including the ones she didn't even know I knew about. And I had done it without saying a word. Because this wasn't just about teaching her a lesson. This was about taking back control. Sophia let out a light laugh, but it wasn't real. She turned to the waiter, her voice measured, but tight. There must be a mistake. Run it again. The waiter nodded, stepping away to confirm. She turned back to me, her smile still intact, but her eyes burning. Lucas, she said through gritted teeth. What the hell is going on? I raised my brows, feigning confusion. What do you mean? You know exactly what I mean, she hissed, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. My card was declined. I took a slow sip of bourbon, letting the warmth spread through me before I set the glass down with a soft clink. That's unfortunate, I mused. Maybe we should check your finances. Her nostrils flared. She was starting to realize. The control she had always wielded so effortlessly? It was gone. The waiter returned. I'm sorry, ma'am. The transaction is still being declined. Do you have another method of payment? Sophia's throat bobbed slightly as she swallowed. And that's when it happened. The guests, the same ones she had spent so much time impressing, the ones she had curated for this event, started to whisper among themselves. I could hear fragments of their murmurs. Did she seriously throw this party without money to pay for it? I thought she had her finances together. Wasn't she cut off by her father? Maybe Lucas isn't as generous as she thought. She heard it too. Her breath hitched just slightly. I could see the calculations spinning in her mind. How to salvage this? How to flip the narrative before it collapsed completely? But there was nothing she could do. Because this wasn't just a small oversight. This was a public humiliation. And I had orchestrated every second of it. Sophia turned to me, her voice a whisper now, sharp and edged with panic. Fix this. I tilted my head slightly. Why would I do that? Her fingers tightened into a white-knuckled grip on the tablecloth. Because you're my husband, she bit out. And you wouldn't humiliate me like this. I gave her a long, slow look. Then, I leaned in, just enough that only she could hear me. Oh, sweetheart, I murmured, my voice low and calm. I thought you said I was only good for paying the bills. Her breath caught, and in that moment, I saw it. The exact second she realized. I wasn't playing along anymore. I wasn't her punching bag, her wallet, her background character in the world she had built for herself. I was done, and she was on her own. The waiter cleared his throat. Ma'am, would you like to put the charges on another account? Sophia's lips pressed into a thin line. And then, the final blow. Her mother stood up. Eleanor, who had watched this unfold with silent disapproval, who had always been aware of her daughter's entitlement, but had never intervened. Until now. Cancel the remaining orders, Eleanor said, her voice sharp. This party is over. Sophia's head snapped toward her. Mother, wait. I will not be part of this disgrace, Eleanor cut in coldly. You have embarrassed yourself enough. Sophia's mouth opened, but no words came out. Because she knew. She had lost. Everything she had planned, everything she had built for tonight, had collapsed in a matter of minutes. And as the guests slowly started to leave, shaking their heads, whispering amongst themselves, I simply leaned back in my chair, watching her world crumble. Because this was just the beginning. I watched Sophia stand there, frozen. Her fingers trembled slightly as she clutched her champagne flute, her knuckles white against the delicate glass. Her carefully curated world, the one she had spent years crafting, the one she had always controlled so effortlessly, was now slipping through her fingers like grains of sand. The murmurs in the ballroom hadn't died down. If anything, they had grown louder. People were talking, whispering behind their hands, pretending to be discreet, but failing miserably. And Sophia? She felt it. The weight of their judgment. The humiliation. Her mother, Eleanor, had already left, her disgust written plainly on her face. The socialites, the executives, The influencers who had once flocked to her, who had been eager to stand beside her in pictures, now avoided her gaze. She wasn't just embarrassed. She was losing them, the people she had built her life around. And yet, even as everything crumbled, she still had the audacity to turn to me, her eyes filled with silent rage. "You did this," she hissed under her breath, so softly that no one else could hear. I leaned back, my fingers drumming lazily against my empty bourbon glass. "Did what?" I asked, my tone casual. She stepped closer, her voice low and venomous. "Don't play dumb, Lucas. You planned this. You set me up." I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. "You mean I didn't bail you out? That's hardly the same thing as setting you up." Her nails dug into her palm. "You canceled my cards. You cut off my accounts. I don't know how, but I know you did it." I swirled the last few drops of bourbon in my glass, watching the amber liquid catch the light. "Sophia," I said, my voice calm, "I'm just confused. You always insisted you were independent, that you didn't need me. But now, suddenly you do?" Her breath hitched. She knew she had walked into that one. For years, she had treated me as nothing more than a financial safety net. She had dismissed me, mocked me, controlled every part of this marriage because she had assumed I would never fight back. And now, here she was, cornered, helpless. But she wasn't done yet. No, Sophia never admitted defeat that easily. She straightened, lifting her chin as if she could still salvage this. "This party was for my mother," she said, her voice carefully controlled, her attempt at turning the narrative. "And you ruined it. You embarrassed me in front of everyone." I arched a brow. "You embarrassed yourself." She inhaled sharply, her shoulders stiff. I stood, adjusting the cuffs of my suit. The movement was slow, deliberate. I wanted her to feel the shift in power. And she did. For the first time in our marriage, I saw something I had never seen in her before. Fear. Not fear of me. Fear of losing everything. Fear of what came next. I leaned in slightly, my voice dropping just enough that only she could hear. "This was never about Eleanor. This was about you. Your image. Your control. And tonight, you lost all of it." Her jaw clenched, but she didn't speak. Because she couldn't argue with the truth. I glanced at the dwindling crowd, then back at her. "Enjoy the rest of your night, Sophia." Then I walked away. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt free. I left the ballroom, stepping outside into the cool night air. The sound of distant traffic hummed in the background, a stark contrast to the chaos inside. I pulled out my phone, checking my messages. Everything was in motion. By the time Sophia got home, she would realize this wasn't just a temporary power move. This was permanent. I had already removed her from all financial accounts. Her credit cards? Canceled. Her access to our shared assets? Gone. The house, the 3-story mansion she loved so much? Legally, it was mine. And as of tonight, the eviction notice was waiting for her. Because this wasn't just about the money. This was about her learning what it felt like to be discarded, just like she had discarded me for years. My driver pulled up to the curb, and I slid into the back seat, exhaling slowly as I loosened my tie. "Home, sir?" the driver asked. I glanced back at the entrance of the venue, imagining the storm brewing inside. Sophia scrambling, realizing she had no way to fix this, that her resources were gone, her power was gone, and, most importantly, her control over me was gone. I smiled. "Yes," I said. "Take me home." I arrived at the house just before midnight. The mansion was dark, silent, eerily so. For years, it had been a showcase, a stage where Sophia curated the illusion of perfection. But tonight, without her hollow presence, it felt different. Peaceful. I walked inside, loosening the top buttons of my shirt, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Then, I poured myself another drink and settled into the leather chair in my office, staring at my phone. I knew it was only a matter of time. And sure enough, 20 minutes later, the front door slammed open. I smirked, taking a slow sip of bourbon. "Here we go." Sophia stormed into my office, her heels clicking furiously against the marble floor. She was still in her party gown, but the carefully constructed mask she wore in public was gone. Her face was flushed with anger, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "You had no right," she spat, slamming her hands onto my desk. I tilted my head, pretending to think. "No right to what?" She let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Oh, don't play games with me, Lucas. You cut me off." I swirled my drink lazily. I did. Her nostrils flared. You can't just throw me out like this. I leaned back, arching a brow. You mean the same way you treated me like an ATM for years? Like I was nothing more than a means to your lifestyle? She blinked rapidly, as if she hadn't expected me to be so direct. You're my husband, she said, her voice wavering slightly. You can't just cut me off like I'm some stranger. I set my glass down, leveling her with a steady gaze. You made it very clear, Sophia, I said, my voice calm but firm. That's exactly what I am to you. A stranger. A wallet. And now? I shrugged. Now, I'm nothing to you. Just like you always wanted. Her breath hitched. Because she knew. She had lost. And for the first time, she had no idea what to do about it. Sophia stood there, breathing heavily, her hands gripping the edge of my desk, as if holding on for dear life. For the first time in our entire marriage, she looked powerless. Her gown, which had once shimmered under the ballroom lights, now looked out of place. A symbol of the life she thought she controlled, a life that was now slipping through her fingers. You can't do this, she whispered, her voice raw. I exhaled slowly, taking a sip of my bourbon before setting the glass down with a quiet clink. I already did. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She was still processing, still trying to comprehend the full extent of what had just happened to her life. You canceled my cards, she said finally, her voice shaking. You cut me off. I leaned back in my chair, tilting my head slightly. Yes. You. She let out a breathless laugh, though there was no humor in it. You emptied our accounts. I smiled slightly. No, Sophia. I emptied my accounts. Her hands trembled against the wood. That house is mine. I continued, my voice steady. The cars, the accounts, the investments, they were always mine. And now, you have nothing. I could see it happening. The moment reality crashed over her like a tidal wave. For so long, she had lived under the illusion that she was in control. That no matter how she treated me, no matter how she dismissed me, I would always be there to provide for her, to clean up her messes, to play my role as her obedient, forgotten husband. She never once considered that I might wake up, that I might fight back, that I might leave her with nothing. Her breath came faster, her chest rising and falling. You wouldn't do this to me, she said, her voice desperate now, frantic. You love me, Lucas. I let out a quiet chuckle, shaking my head. She was grasping at straws now. Love, I repeated, arching a brow. Is that what you call what we had? She flinched. You never loved me, Sophia. I continued, my voice lower now, sharper. You loved what I could give you. You loved the money, the security, the status. But me? I leaned forward, meeting her wide, desperate gaze. You never gave a damn about me. Tears pooled in her eyes, but I knew better. Sophia didn't cry for love. She cried for loss, for power slipping through her fingers, for the life she thought she had secured now unraveling in front of her. I can fix this, she whispered suddenly, her voice softer now, almost pleading. Lucas, just let's talk. We can work this out. I watched her carefully, my expression unreadable. Work this out. Now, suddenly, she wanted to fix things. Now, when she had nothing left, when she was finally feeling what it was like to be on the receiving end of the humiliation and neglect she had given me for years, she wanted to talk. I exhaled slowly, standing up from my chair, adjusting my suit. I walked around the desk, stopping right in front of her. She looked up at me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. For a moment, I just stared at her. At the woman I had once thought I could build a life with. At the woman who had spent 3 years using me. You don't love me, Sophia, I said quietly, my voice filled with finality. You never did. And now, you're not even pretending to. She blinked rapidly. Lucas, please. I shook my head. This isn't a negotiation, I interrupted, my voice firmer now. I didn't do this to hurt you, Sophia. I did this because I finally understood something. Her lips trembled. What? I stared at her for a long moment. That you were never my wife, I said. You were just an expensive lesson. Her breath caught in her throat. For the first time in our entire marriage, she looked small, weak, defeated. I turned away, walking toward the door. Lucas, she called, her voice breaking. Wait. I paused but didn't look back. Where am I supposed to go? She whispered. I closed my eyes briefly, then exhaled. Not my problem. And with that, I walked out of the room. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I could finally breathe. I heard the front door slam behind me as I stepped outside into the cool night air. The sky was dark, the streets quiet. A new beginning. A fresh start. No more lies. No more pretending. Just me, free from the weight of a woman who never truly saw me as anything more than a bank account with a heartbeat. I pulled out my phone, dialing a number I had memorized. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Lucas. I exhaled. It's done. There was silence on the other end, then a soft chuckle. About damn time. I smiled. Because they were right. It was about time. I got into my car, started the engine, and pulled away from the house that was no longer ours. Sophia would have to figure out her next move. As for me, I had never been so sure of mine. The next morning, I woke up to silence. It was the first thing I noticed. For 3 years, my mornings had been filled with noise. The sound of Sophia's phone buzzing with notifications from social media, the distant hum of her voice as she ordered overpriced coffee, the clinking of expensive jewelry as she rummaged through her designer closet. But today, nothing. No presence lingering beside me in bed. No perfume filling the air. No entitled demands waiting for me the moment I stepped out of the bedroom. It was just me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. I exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over my face before getting up. The mansion felt different now, less like a showroom and more like a home. The carefully curated decor, once chosen solely to impress, now felt meaningless without her constant presence to flaunt it. But I didn't feel loss. I felt relief. Until my phone rang. I reached for it, glancing at the screen. Unknown number. I already knew who it was. I sighed before answering. Sophia. A pause. Then, a sharp exhale. So that's it, she asked. Her voice was low, tense. You're really going to do this? I walked to the window, looking out at the morning skyline. The city stretched out before me. I already did. She let out a hollow laugh, but I could hear the panic behind it. You think you've won, Lucas? She said. You think you can just throw me away like some discarded piece of furniture? I didn't respond, because I knew that wasn't the real issue here. She wasn't calling because she was heartbroken. She was calling because, for the first time in her life, she was powerless. She had spent years carefully crafting her illusion of perfection, manipulating everyone around her into believing she was untouchable. But now, the mask had been ripped away, and she had nothing left to hide behind. You did this to yourself, I said simply. She scoffed. Oh, please. You're acting like I was some kind of villain. Like I was some monster who never cared about you. I stayed silent. Because we both knew the truth. You knew who I was when you married me, she continued, her voice sharp now. You knew what kind of life I wanted. And you were perfectly fine with it, until now. Until you decided to turn into some self-righteous. Until I decided I deserved better. I cut in. She stopped. The silence stretched between us, thick with undeniable truth. Finally, she let out a slow breath. You think you're better than me, Lucas? I thought about that for a moment. No, I said, but I finally realized that I deserve more than you. She inhaled sharply, but I didn't give her a chance to respond. I hung up, and just like that, it was over. The next few days passed in a blur. Sophia had no money, no access to my assets, no home of her own to retreat to. Her mother, Eleanor, had refused to take her back, disgusted by how she had embarrassed the family. Her so-called friends, the ones who had always surrounded her at parties, laughed at her jokes, clung to her in social settings, had vanished the moment they realized she was no longer useful. She had spent her entire life building a kingdom out of smoke and mirrors. And now, she was standing in the ashes. I wasn't sure where she had gone after I left her in that mansion. I didn't ask. I didn't care. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't chasing after someone who never truly saw me. I was moving forward. A week later, I got a call from my lawyer. Divorce papers are ready, he said simply. I closed my eyes, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I had known this was coming, had wanted this, had planned for this. But hearing it out loud, it felt like a final door closing. Like the last thread tying me to the life I once thought I wanted had finally snapped. When do I sign? I asked. Whenever you're ready, he replied. We can move forward immediately, considering the circumstances. Given that she has no claim to your assets, it should be clean. I nodded to myself. Clean. Something my life had never been since the day I said, I do to a woman who had never loved me. I'll come in tomorrow, I said. And with that, I ended the call. That night, I sat in my office, staring at the divorce papers on my desk. The final step. The last thing standing between me and a future that was finally mine again. I picked up a pen, exhaling slowly before signing my name at the bottom. Lucas Bennett. A signature that no longer belonged to Sophia's husband. A name that was finally mine again. I set the pen down, leaning back in my chair. It was done. No regrets. No doubts. No turning back. For years, I had been trapped in a marriage built on manipulation and convenience. In a relationship where I had been nothing more than a wallet in someone else's world. And now, I was free. For the first time in a long time, I could finally say with certainty, I had won. The next morning, I woke up with an unfamiliar feeling. Lightness. There was no weight pressing down on my chest, no underlying tension simmering beneath the surface of my day. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up feeling like I was stepping into a war zone. I stretched, exhaling as the realization settled in. It was over. The papers were signed, the ties had been severed, and Sophia no longer had a claim to me or anything I owned. It was a strange sensation, being truly alone. Not the lonely kind of alone, but the kind where I finally had space to breathe. No forced conversations. No passive-aggressive comments over breakfast. No watching my money disappear into things that had nothing to do with me. Just silence. And for the first time in my life, I didn't hate it. By noon, I had settled into my office, going through emails when my phone rang. I expected it to be my lawyer or a business associate. But when I glanced at the screen, my brows furrowed. Sophia. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. A part of me was tempted to ignore it. I owed her nothing. And yet, a small part of me was curious. What could she possibly want now? With a sigh, I answered. There was silence on the other end for a moment before she spoke. Lucas. Her voice sounded different. Not the smooth, polished confidence I was used to. Not the fake sweetness she used when she wanted something. She sounded tired. I leaned back in my chair. What do you want, Sophia? A sharp inhale. You don't have to sound so distant. She trailed off, and for a brief second, I thought she might be reconsidering her words. But then she sighed. I need your help. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It wasn't a joyful laugh. It was sharp, disbelieving. She had spent 3 years using me, and now that I had finally cut her off, she had the audacity to ask for my help? That's not going to happen, I said flatly. Lucas, please. Her voice cracked slightly. I don't have anywhere to go. I tapped my fingers against my desk, my expression unreadable. A week ago, I might have felt something. Pity maybe. The urge to fix things. To make it easier for her, even after everything. But not anymore. You had a home, I said coolly. You just never saw it as one. You saw it as a showpiece. A status symbol. And now that it's gone, you suddenly care? She swallowed audibly. You don't understand. No, Sophia, I said, my voice firm. I understand perfectly. She was silent for a moment. And then, she did something I never expected. She cried. Not the fake, manipulative tears she used to get her way. These were real. I don't know what to do, she whispered. I spent my whole life thinking. I thought if I just built the perfect life, if I surrounded myself with the right people, I would be happy. But now, she let out a shaky breath. Now I don't even know who I am without all of it. I should have felt satisfaction. I should have enjoyed hearing her fall apart. But all I felt was emptiness. Because the truth was, I had stopped caring about Sophia long before she realized she had lost me. You'll figure it out, I said simply. Her breath hitched. That's it. That's all you have to say. I rubbed my temple, suddenly exhausted. What do you expect, Sophia? Do you want me to swoop in and save you? Give you another chance? Put you up in a luxury penthouse until you get back on your feet? Silence. Because she knew. That was exactly what she wanted. But I wasn't that man anymore. I exhaled slowly, my voice softer this time. You never saw me, Sophia. You never saw us. And now, you're finally feeling what it's like to be left in the cold. Lucas. I cut her off. Goodbye, Sophia. And then, for the last time, I hung up. That night, I sat on the balcony, a glass of bourbon in hand, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. For the first time in 3 years, my mind was clear. No weight on my shoulders. No anxiety clawing at the edges of my thoughts. Just peace. Sophia would find a way to survive. She always did. But I wasn't going to be part of that journey. She had made her choices. And now, I was making mine. A new beginning. A new life. One without her. A year had passed since I had last spoken to Sophia. 12 months. 365 days since I had hung up that final call, leaving her to figure out her own life for once. And in that time, I had changed. Not in the dramatic, Hollywood movie kind of way. I didn't wake up one day with some grand revelation about love and second chances. I didn't suddenly feel the urge to chase after happiness like a desperate fool. No, I simply learned how to live again. Without her. Without the weight of our past. Without constantly questioning whether I was enough, whether I was doing enough, whether I would ever be seen as more than just a wallet in someone else's world. I had spent the past year rebuilding myself, and it felt damn good. It started with small things. For the first time in years, I actually enjoyed my home. Without Sophia's extravagant touch, without her constant need to impress, the mansion had started to feel like an actual place to live, rather than a showroom. I redecorated, not in some massive, over-the-top way, but in a way that finally made it mine. I got rid of the cold, lifeless furniture she had insisted on. I replaced the expensive but uncomfortable chairs with things I actually liked. I filled the rooms with things that mattered to me, not what would look best on Instagram. I started traveling again, not to show off, but because I actually wanted to see the world. I went on solo trips. I hiked in places I never would have gone with Sophia. I went to cities where no one knew my name, where I didn't have to play the role of the perfect husband in a perfect life that never existed. And in doing all of that, I found something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Real, unfiltered, uncomplicated freedom. Then, one afternoon, everything came full circle. I was sitting in my favorite cafe, a small, quiet spot in the city that Sophia would have turned her nose up at when I saw her. Sophia. She was sitting by the window, staring down at a coffee cup with an unreadable expression. I almost didn't recognize her. Her hair, once always perfectly styled, now had a natural wave to it. The expensive designer dresses she used to flaunt were gone, replaced by simple but elegant clothes that actually looked comfortable. And the biggest difference? She was alone. No group of socialites around her. No carefully curated presence. No show to put on. Just her. For a moment, I debated whether or not to walk past without saying anything. I didn't know her a conversation. We had said everything that needed to be said. But then, as if sensing my presence, she looked up. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw me. And for the first time in years, there was no smugness, no superiority. Just something softer. Something real. I let out a slow breath before walking over. Mind if I sit? She blinked, caught off guard. No. Sure. I pulled out the chair across from her, settling in. There was a brief silence as we studied each other. Then, she smiled. Small, hesitant. You look good. I smirked slightly. So do you? She huffed a quiet laugh, shaking her head. That's a lie, but I'll take it. I glanced at the cup in her hands. Didn't expect to find you here. She exhaled. Yeah, well, a lot has changed. I arched a brow. So I've heard. She looked away, tapping her fingers against the ceramic mug. I guess you know then. I nodded. That your old circle cut you off? That you had to move out of the city? Yeah. She let out a breath, staring down at her coffee. It was rough for a while. I didn't say anything. She let the silence sit for a moment before continuing. I had to learn how to survive on my own, she admitted. Had to get a job. Had to figure out how to live without the money, the connections, the name. I tilted my head. And she let out a small, dry laugh. And it sucked. I chuckled, shaking my head. Yeah, that sounds about right. She sighed, tracing the rim of her cup. But it also made me see things differently. I watched her carefully, waiting. I spent my whole life thinking that success meant being seen. That power meant being admired, feared, envied. But when I lost everything, when I had no one left, I realized that none of it mattered. She looked up at me, her gaze softer than I had ever seen it. And I realized, I never really saw you, Lucas. I inhaled slowly, letting the words settle between us. I know I can't change the past, she said quietly. I know I don't deserve anything from you. But I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. The words were simple, but they meant something. I could see it in her eyes. This wasn't the old Sophia, the one who played people like chess pieces, who manipulated and controlled. This was someone else. Someone who had finally been humbled by life. And for the first time, I actually believed her. I nodded slowly. Thank you. She swallowed, looking down at her hands. So, are you happy? I thought about that for a moment. Then I smiled. Yeah, I am. She exhaled, a small smile tugging at her lips. Good. You deserve that. I studied her for a long moment. And then, just like that, I stood up. Because this wasn't a reunion. This was an unfinished business. This was just closure. You'll be okay, I said simply. She looked up at me, blinking rapidly. And then, after a pause, she nodded. Yeah, she whispered. I think I will. I gave her one last small smile. And then I walked away. Not with regret. Not with resentment. Just peace. Because after everything, I had won. Not by destroying her. Not by getting revenge. But by finally being free of her. And that was enough.